The WNBA expansion draft is done. The Golden State Valkyries have their initial team. I don't think this will be their final team for the season. And the Indiana Fever have lost a player, or rather more effectively, the right to a player in Temi Fagbenle, going from Indiana to Golden State in this expansion draft. Tony East here, covering the Fever for the Next, and have covered the team since the Wubble back in 2020, really since 2019, but more so since then. And I have a lot of thoughts on this, what the Fever did and did not do, what Golden State did, what it signals about their team, and what this signals about what the Fever could be up to in a month from now when free agency really gets kicked off. I hope this is insightful, because I think what was interesting to me about this was the reaction from fans when it was Temi Fagbenle, who I would agree with you all, to be clear, people who think this way, was one of their best 5, 4, 3, 6, whatever you want to say, players last season. Was a terrific player, right? And no doubt about it. The thing that made Temi Fagbenle a good fit with the Fever last year to me was her pace. She could really run up-tempo, fit in well with the team's best players, often closed games, played big minutes in the postseason. Last year, the Fever's net rating with Temi on the floor was 1.09, and with her off was minus 4.96, right? So clearly a much better team with her out there, or a much more effective team, largely because their defense was better. Their offense was pretty similar. And, of course, a great partner with Caitlin Clark. The team was great with both Temi and Caitlin Clark on the floor, and was a minus net rating with any combination of just one or neither of them on the floor. So a good player and a good fit with their star upshot point guard. But yet, that is not the full story of this to me. So let's start. I'm actually going to start with Golden State, and you'll see why as I get to this. Golden State picked Temi Fagbenle, which means the Fever did not protect her. And I said yesterday, for those of you who watched my video previewing the expansion draft, that I wondered who the sixth player the Fever would protect would be. Almost assuredly, last year's starting five from the postseason for the Fever: Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, NaLyssa Smith, Lexi Hall. Those are all locks to me. Even if you don't think NaLyssa Smith should be back, her trade value is high. They should keep her around, and she is good. She is, in fact, a good player. So those five were the locks to me, and then I wondered personally if their sixth choice would be Temi Fagbenle or Damiris Dantas. And the arguments would be, well, Temi's very good and fits very well, but is entering free agency and is about to cost a lot of money, or more money, to keep around on the team, and might want a one-year deal because of the CBA, and just, these aren't all negatives. She's a good player. The Fever should want to have her, and every team should want to have her. But Dantas is locked up for that year already. You know the contract amount. You know that she can shoot on a team that's certainly going to want to up their ability to knock in threes next season. I saw the argument for both just because of the contract part of it. And that's why I want to start with Golden State, because Golden State picked Temi. I wondered if Golden State would pick Grace Berger, an established young talent who was all rookie, her rookie year 2 years ago for the Fever, or Katie Lou Samuelson, who has been great in the past, was not as good last year, and has a contract that would help them hit the salary floor at some point. Not really thinking about them picking a free agent like Temi, who they could just not even end up negotiating with. Like, it's possible Temi does not end up with Golden State next year. We'll see. I don't think they would have picked her without some thought that it could work out that way. But either way, an interesting decision, because now they have to negotiate with her at some point, either in restricted free agency or however they decide to do this. They did pick Temi Fagbenle. They also picked a couple other players who have either not played in the W before and have had their contracts suspended since getting drafted, or are about to enter free agency, right? And they could court like someone like Monique Billings, who was their choice from the Phoenix Mercury. So all that to say, it looks to me like Golden State's plan is to either use cap space to sign lots of players, and use free agency as a tool to add on top of what they just acquired in this expansion draft, or Golden State's plan is to do something that the Fever did very smartly in past seasons, and that's use their cap space that they're now going to have by having this cheap roster to get picks in trades. So, for example, if a different team, not Golden State or Indiana, has a really expensive roster and they want to free up cap space to sign someone else, they could trade away a player who's making maybe too much money, or money that doesn't make sense for their role. But why would another team want that player? So to incentivize the trade, teams have traded bloated contracts attached to draft picks for smaller contracts in return. The Fever were very sharp doing this, right? Jantel Lavender coming to the Fever in, I believe, 2021, maybe late 2020, for Stephanie Mavunga, and the Fever got 2 draft picks out of that, a second-round pick and a third-round pick. I think that was 2020 because it was Wubble-ish time, right? And then Bria Hartley, very, very similar scenario. This was 2022. I believe this was a Lynn Dunn trade, or one of the early Lynn Dunn moves. It might have been one of Tamika Catching's last moves. I can't remember the exact timing. But the Fever got Bria Hartley and a first-rounder, a good first-round pick in the draft by taking on her contract that Phoenix did not want, right? So that is a sharp way to use space to get more draft capital, something Golden State, who's building a team from scratch, would certainly want. So that is why I think that many, including me, overlooked that possibility of Golden State picking a free agent off of the Fever instead of picking a player with a contract who is more of a known commodity in terms of Grace Berger or Katie Lou, who to me were the most natural fits for that. So that's why I think that was overlooked by me as a potential option for Golden State to do. Now let's talk about the Fever side of this, right? Temi Fagbenle got picked, which means she was not protected. I said this yesterday, and I'll say my exact thinking and go in a little more detail. I said I thought the Fever would protect their 5 starters from last year's playoffs and most of the season in this draft. Of course, Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, Lexi Hall, Aaliyah Boston, and Alyssa Smith. Alyssa Smith for trade value purposes, although she is a good player, right? But if she doesn't end up fitting in the way that some think, right, she didn't play as many minutes as the rest of those starters in the playoffs. Either way, you'd like to have that asset and talent on your team. And then my 6th player thought was either Damiris Dantas or Temi Fagbenle. I already ran through this stuff. But, with as good as Temi Fagbenle is and as much as she fits, I wonder now what the Fever's next iteration looks like. That's what I think people missed when they were really, really thinking about why they would do what they would do protecting players. Do we know for a fact the Fever are going to try to play the same way next year? In fact, we know for a fact that's not the case. They have a new coach, right? Now, let's be clear. Caitlin Clark's best style is in the open floor. Brilliant transition player, passing, flying up and down, getting up threes. That should still be a fabric of the Indiana Fever team, right? But a new coach is coming in Stephanie White, who was going to want to play a little differently than last year. The first practice we could see of the Fever last year, we could see them watching transition clips. They wanted to play in the open floor. And they might want to do that again. But they need to be a better half-court team. And to do that, that's going to require lots of things, obviously. Lots of players need to get better. But, I'm in United Center right now. I just watched the Indiana Pacers score 130-something points because they had spacing and movement and paint pressure. And Temi Fagbenle is a very, very, very good player. Awesome pick-and-roll player, very speedy, good rebounder. Doesn't provide as much of that spacing element as the Fever might get from either someone like Damiris Dantas, who shot it well at times last year, or using money now they can use because they're not re-signing Temi Fagbenle on someone else. Maybe they want to make a trade in free agency, and to do so requires sending out Dantas. I don't know why that would be the case. I'd have to think of a specific trade that would require that, but maybe that's something they want to do. Maybe they just want to use more space, right? You keep Kelsey Mitchell via the core designation, you re-sign some other players or don't re-sign some other players, who knows? But they have more wiggle room to now do so because they're not going to be spending money on Temi Fagbenle, who now has her rights owned by Golden State. So that's the part of this I think people kind of missed. If you were just not even blind, if you were just ranking the Fever players from last year 1 to 12 in terms of ability and impact they had on winning, and then you protected the best 6, they would have protected Temi Fagbenle. But that's not the entire part of this operation, right? That's why some players like Kate Martin are available. She was not in the top 6 for Las Vegas, but a lot of people thought the Aces would still try to keep her because she's young and talented and growing and, quite frankly, a very popular player. Instead, unprotected and got picked. Veronica Burton. When I ran through my exercise yesterday of players the Fever could try to maybe trade for if the Valkyries are going to pick them, I said, Nelson Adota from Connecticut, because they're going to have to figure out who they're protecting. They protected Nelson Adota instead of Veronica Burton, which is how she got free. There's a lot of factors to this that we'll never know unless teams truly admit them. But I do wonder if the Fever's thinking on how they were protecting players had more to do about what they want their next style of play to be. If they're not going to play as transition heavy and they hope to be a better half-court team, and we heard Stephanie White talk about this. I wrote it in my piece from her press conference about them, playing more freely and creatively in the half court and trying to, use their principles to be good, but also break out of it when they can to be the best team possible. That rang to me like a team that's going to need a lot of movement and spacing and free-flowing natures. And getting those kind of players requires having shooters on a team. And for all the things Temi Fagbenle is great at, shooting is not necessarily one of them, although she can get them up from deep. So that's where this is and where it ended up. The Fever no longer have Temi Fagbenle's restricted free agent rights. Those are now owned, by the Golden State Valkyries, and the Fever can now move into free agency knowing that Kelsey Mitchell still probably top priority, but they're going to have a lot of wiggle room to work with Erica Wheeler's contract coming off the books. Now Temi Fagbenle is coming off the books, an ability to get some other non-guaranteed contracts off if they want. They have their first-round pick. They have trade assets. They can do a lot of stuff now, and that is their reality after the WNBA expansion draft. If I didn't explain something well, or I over-explained something, let me know. Comment down below what you think about what the Fever did. If you asked me again before the draft who my 6 players would have been, and you made me actually pick 6 instead of just saying 6 of these 7, I would have protected Temi Fagbenle myself. But I think that this does signal, hey, perhaps something different could be coming for the Fever stylistically and for Golden State. Plenty more to come on coverage of the Fever's offseason and what goes on around the W. Hope you guys learned something from this because I have covered the team for more time than just the last year. Back soon with more videos. Going to be lots of Pacer stuff on this channel because they're currently playing games. But thank you all for checking these out when they come out. See you soon.